Welcome to Aberdeen Proving Ground's Hidden History. I am your host, Sean Kief, along with my co-host, Susan Thompson. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing just peachy.
That was last episode.
Oh, okay. Got my days all mixed up here. So, Susan, we're just going to get right back into it again. It's been 2 weeks since our first episode on Plumb dropped. As promised in our last episode, we're going to have a special guest, the first guest to the podcast.
Well, I hope it's someone fantastic.
Oh, I wouldn't expect anything less from myself, Susan. So today's guest, he's a world traveler. He swims with sharks and just an all-around nice guy. And you're just going to pretend that he hasn't been sitting here the whole time.
Okay.
But I'd like to introduce to the podcast, Mr. Lucas Taylor. Welcome to the Octagon.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Lucas is the spouse of Major General Randy Taylor, retired. Major General Taylor was Aberdeen Proving Ground Senior Commander and Commanding General of the U.S. Army Communications Electronics Command, otherwise known as CECOM. Lucas, one of the reasons I really wanted you as a guest on this podcast is because of your love and knowledge of the Quarters 1 residents. When I photographed many of the events at Quarters 1, I always remember you proudly giving tours of the home and sharing its rich history with your guests. As you know, Susan, the Quarters 1 home has gone through many, many changes through the years. But do we know exactly when it was built?
Well, the history that we have written says they think it was built around 1790 or so. I've done a little deed research, and based on my reading of the deeds, there were a lot of transfers. I personally think it was built probably between 1814 and 1822. We have a for sale article in the newspapers about 1854. And at that time, they're talking about that there is a fine brick dwelling house. It says it has 4 rooms on the first floor, 4 rooms on the second floor with a large passage, and an adjacent stone kitchen. So that's about 1854 that we have really a description of anything that was on the property. So they did extensive remodeling well after it had already been in existence as the Commanding General's house from 1917 forward, when they were building some of the other quarters at Plumb Point area. So what I've read, I don't really have a lot of documentation, is that they tore down a significant amount of the building. They reoriented it so it does face the water now instead of facing the other direction, and they made it into a stone structure that looks very similar. But we believe that the kitchen is one of the original portions of the house, or maybe it was the original stone kitchen.
Yes.
Okay.
The kitchen is still in that area of the home. In fact, if you're looking from the outside, the white stucco portion,
Right.
all of that is kitchen on the first floor, and above that is a bathroom and a closet. The house is a little unusual that you have very thick walls on the outside, I believe 18-inch thick quarried granite. But you also have 3 interior walls. The wall that separates the kitchen from the dining room from the living room, and then the living room from the foyer are all 12-inch granite walls. It makes a Wi-Fi signal a bit tricky.
The public was never allowed farther than the first floor. So when you get up to the second floor of the home, is there anything that could possibly be out of the ordinary that could even show like how the structure has changed?
Sure. I would like to say that I actually attempted the 2 Christmases I lived in the home. I attempted to do tour of homes, where I did actually open the house completely up. However, we had a former president to die one year and have his funeral the day of the tour of homes, which canceled it. And I believe the year prior to that, it was a snowstorm that canceled it.
Okay.
So I think the most we ever had was about 50 people to show up. The basement of the home is broken up into multiple rooms, all quarried granite walls. And from that room is how you can see the dividing walls, the 12-inch quarried granite walls that you can that go all the way up to the roof line of the house. One of the unusual things of the house, anyone from the outside can tell, it's a very large house. The first floor has only got 5 rooms. Mm-hmm. It's the kitchen, the dining room, the living room, the foyer, and the receiving room. And that's it. Which is unusual for a 1935 house. It would typically be chopped up into lots of little rooms. So I commend the architect who designed that home because he understood that it should be a home used for gatherings. And the second floor is 3 bedrooms. So again, it was not meant to be a house for a large family to live in. I believe that the architect realized that it would be a more mature officer, most likely empty nester, be staying at the home.
Now, there are 2 stories. Is there also an attic space?
Yes, a large attic that's accessible from the second floor from a staircase. And it's a narrow staircase. And when you go up there, the flooring is kind of a rough cut timber. Mm-hmm. So, you kind of see the gaps between the floorboards. The ceiling has some type of metal insulation covering to it, but it's something you can definitely stand up in. And at the far back corner of that room is just a random door. And when I moved in, there was just this like lace apron that someone would wear in the kitchen, just thrown over this glass. And there's no reason for it because it's from the outside. There is no door up there. It actually just goes to a patio.
So I'm going to backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
So we're on the second floor. Now you're saying there's an actual staircase that leads to the attic.
Yes.
Okay. Is it livable space if you wanted it to be? Is there that much room, or is it just kind of more like kind of closed, slanted roof?
How much headroom do you have?
Yeah, how much headroom?
Can Sean?
I'm 6'4". I'm kind of like looking for a place to stay.
Sure. By DC standards, the attic would be a $3,000 a month place. It is actually a very large room with the staircase comes up into the center of the room. You do have the air handler that was put in at some point that kind of chops up the room a bit.
Okay.
But this is a space where if you needed to gather, let's say 20 or 30 people for a cocktail party, maybe in a buffalo plaid, because it'd be very rustic, cowboy boots. But if you want to gather...
I think you're on to something here.
Yes.
I think you're on to something here.
I think I just found the speakeasy of Aberdeen Proving Ground.
Okay, because I know on the first floor, to get to the second floor, the staircase is to the far right as you enter. Mm-hmm. That takes you up to the second story.
It's as soon as you come up onto the landing of the second story, to your right is laundry, and to your left is a random door. And you open the door, and it's a staircase.
Oh, okay. And that takes you up to the attic.
Mm-hmm. And he says the staircase in the attic comes out kind of in the middle of the big attic room. I totally agree with you that when they redid the structure in about 1935, it was obviously meant to be an entertainment house, a house of significance, that where you could look at it and see, oh, this is where someone important lives, because it was a very modest looking kind of farmhouse. Sean and I went out there because we always got questions about how did this change over time, and looking at the old pictures, it's very confusing because the orientation was sort of where across from the tennis courts and things are now.
Correct. The original entrance faced the tennis courts.
Right. So currently, the main entrance faces the water. So it's meant to be, here's the bay, but the more ceremonial side faces what was the parade ground and the golf course, so it has these large columns so it makes a statement if you're standing in that area of Plumb Point, so that you can see this is the general's house. It has the big white columns. Here it is. But that faces more it's not meant to be the main entrance. It's more kind of an entertainment space, I think.
Was that a parade field that existed where, it was a golf course at one time?
It was a golf course. I believe it was first referenced in the 20s. When I spoke with the cultural resources manager here, he said he could remember people still hitting golf balls when he got here in 2000, but really it had sort of been taken offline as the main golf course in the 80s.
Okay.
But yeah, so that was the parade field. We have a great photograph from 1920
it's a wonderful photograph
of Colonel Phillips with his staff. He's on the parade ground in front of a gazebo, but off in the distance, you can see what Quarters 1 looked like at the time. But it's basically the big open space. That's where they had the Victory over Europe Day celebration in May of 1945 in the pouring rain. They came out onto the golf course / parade field. It was really a multi-purpose space. in APG over the years, but it became more formal in the 1930s when they designed a lot of the Plumb Point housing. It really became like a designed landscape when they built the officers' quarters. When they redid the general officers' quarters, top of the bay, it became much more of a functional designed landscape.
But the building that exists today with the columns, that did not exist in 1917. That particular structure was built in the 30s, correct?
Right. So they took what was the existing house, which, we don't have an exact date, but it was there probably from the 18 teens forward. So it was probably about 100 years old when APG came to the property in 1917. They immediately started using it as the general officers' quarters. That was the commander's quarters. It was evidently in pretty good shape at the time, so it just existed as it was for 20 years or so till they were redesigning installations with WPA funds, with New Deal funds. They had money to improve Army housing across many installations, and APG got almost $3.5 million of improvements during that time frame.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's pretty amazing.
So they were really, building a new type of campus here at Plumb Point.
So when it was decided that this was going to be the commanding officer's home, was it the largest home on Plumb Point? Is that why it was selected?
In 1917, it was probably one of the few houses that existed. The whole farm at the time was owned by one person called C.W. Baker. So he owned this area, which was called Plumb Point Farm. He also owned the adjacent farm. So he basically owned the whole peninsula. And then a little farther south, there was a man named J.M. Hopkins who owned the farm just to the south of the Plumb Point Farm. It was called Holly Tree Farm. And there was a house there called Hopkins House. And that and Quarters 1 are the only two existing structures on Aberdeen Proving Ground North that predate the establishment of Aberdeen Proving Ground.
Save the date. The BEA STEM Conference and Hiring Event is coming to Baltimore, Maryland, February 15th through 17th. The BEA STEM Conference offers K-12 students, college students, corporate, government, and military professionals, and STEM employers 3 days of learning, networking, celebrating excellence, and showcasing career opportunities. In 2023, Army Materiel Command offered over 260 jobs to qualified candidates as part of the career fair. Stay tuned for more information for the 2024 BEA STEM Conference and Hiring Event.
So, Lucas, prior to your arrival at Aberdeen Proving Ground, General Taylor was stationed at the Pentagon?
We were stationed at the Pentagon for 3 years. We lived on Capitol Hill in a tiny 500 square foot apartment.
500 square foot.
Yes.
Okay.
Randy had convinced me that we would only be there for a year.
Okay.
And that we could suck up anything for 1 year. So 3 years later.
In 500 square feet.
Yes.
Okay. Well, when you come to Aberdeen Proving Ground and you're provided with Quarters 1, how many square feet are we talking about?
I believe the living area of the house is right around 5,000 square feet, which doesn't include a fully usable basement. Mm-hmm. That's another about 2,000 square feet, and then an attic that is also usable. That's another 1,000 square feet. And all of that is actually under air. So it makes it a total of 8,000 square feet.
Wow.
Did you have to buy new furniture?
Yes, we did. I mean, we're good military families,
right,
so we went to the thrift shop and found chairs and different things to add. There were a handful of pieces of furniture that were provided for us that came with the house, like the dining table. The dining table seated 14 people, and I don't know many people who carry around a 14-seat dining table with them.
No, because you're meant to use it as an entertainment space and bring in the dignitaries, which I know you did because I know Sean took a lot of photographs.
Yes, I was a frequent guest at Quarters 1 once a month.
Well, it was important to us. When we saw the house and you walk into the house, and like we've already said, that the house is designed to be used and a working home for the community. And that became very important to Randy and I to use this house in that way. It even became an extension of Randy's office. He would quite often host breakfast and lunches at the home with important like congressmen or people from the Pentagon that was coming in. Any way of lightening the mood and not having conversation to be too stiff. I believe after 26 months he was in command, we put just shy of 2,000 people through the home.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's a lot. And I've got the photographic evidence to prove it.
So what was it like living sort of in this neighborhood as it was? Because you had the water right there and, the beautiful views down what was the golf course. And
Susan, this is a man who swims with sharks, so he's very familiar with the water.
So it is a fishbowl.
Yeah.
It is. You, especially in this house, at the very end of Plumb Point, anyone who has driven the Plumb Point loop, you've seen this house. This house stands out to you. So that took some getting used to. It was the first time I have personally ever lived on a military installation. There's always good, there's bad.
Right.
To include living in a house that is as old as this one. I know the dates kind of vary. You can tell us more about that, but I've heard dates as old as 1720 and as new, if you want to call it new, about 1820.
Yeah.
So 100-year span of a house appeared here at some point. And there were a lot of challenges. It's a little drafty at times.
I know mice can be a problem in stone-walled houses because I had
Never. In a house this old? No, mice have moved on.
So we were very fortunate when it came to mice that we never had them in our true living space.
That's good.
But that was because I was very diligent in the attic. So we had the exterminator come over, and he would show up to the house about once a month to replenish the 3 dozen mouse traps in the attic. 3 dozen. And I would go up into the attic about every 2 days with gloves and garbage bags to collect.
Okay, stop it. You're twice the man that I am. I can tell you that right now. I do not deal with mice.
Sean does not like mice.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
But
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Continue, please.
I do feel like I need therapy for all the mice. I never once saw a mouse in the living part of the home, and I never saw a live mouse, but I did have to collect traps. Again, it was always 2 to 4 every 2 days.
Were you like laying in bed at night hearing like snapping going off? I mean, because that's what I hear when I have a mouse in the house. So
it was a very solid house. So
yeah, with those thick
12-inch
walls. Yeah,
you're not hearing the mouse
yikes.
trap.
Holy smokes.
So I'm allergic to cats, but I did consider maybe we needed a couple of cats. Working cats.
Yeah. Well, then they bring them to you, right? Susan's very fond of cats, and she gets presents all the time.
Right. But they don't kill them. They think they're toys.
Which is, I don't know what's worse, to be honest with you.
It's like, here's my little friend.
Oh, no. I'm going to need to put my head down right now. Excuse me.
Yeah, so your cat adopts.
Right. Well, they play with them until they perish, I guess. They can't tell the difference between what's a toy and what's a actual. It's really gotten off track.
Well, I'm going to change the subject
Okay,
here
go ahead,
because
Sean.
okay, keep it down. Oh, okay. But one thing that I noticed when you both arrived to the Proving Ground and the Quarters One was how deeply you wanted to connect to the community, which explains why General Taylor opened the house up. Was it once a month? You would usually have a community event in the home?
We definitely always had a nighttime event monthly. And those were official.
Yeah,
We
of
had
course, yeah.
Several other unofficial events because we were more than happy. We had a retirement ceremony for a gentleman retiring after, I think, 22 years. I knew his wife, and she had approached me and said, could we use the house? Because I had told many people that if you have something that's worthy for this house to be used for, and a retirement ceremony would definitely, Randy and I would consider to be worthy use of the property. we were more than happy to give it to anyone. So she had approached me, and we did a retirement ceremony for 120 people.
Oh, wow.
Which was the most the house had ever had at one time, and it was elbow to elbow. It was tight. And
We got 5,000 square feet.
But they're not in every square foot of that.
yeah,
We can make it work, Susan. We can make it work.
some of the other events that we held there, we held breakfasts, lunches, dinners. The Spouses Club would quite often use it 2 to 3 times a year for a different event. And we even had a community charitable group, arts, dance group putting on a performance arts center. They're building a performance arts center in Bel Air, and they had a dance competition, and we did a social for them. And this is all private, that just Randy and I. These were non-military events. And again, because this house belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to us. It's owned by the Army, and the Army is part of the people. So we had a definite belief that anyone who wanted to come in this house should be able to see it at some point. But we enjoyed having people in the home.
It was General Strong, General Farrell, and General Crawford who served in that position before General Taylor.
General Strong, he was here during the remodel. So, and I actually do know some of the details that were changed.
Okay.
Because I'm friends with Lori Strong.
Okay.
So they didn't even live on post.
Right, because they had come down from Fort Monmouth, and of course, their quarters one was also, I know they did a whole walk-through tour of it before Brack closed Fort Monmouth. So then, right, because his daughter was going to school, was still in high school at the time, and they wanted to live more off post, but it was kind of, so I didn't realize that they were doing remodels of the building at the time.
Yeah, so Corvius had taken the property over.
Okay.
And that's when the kitchen got remodeled. They
okay.
did some updates to the master. That section of the house is what got touched. So Corvius replaced windows with cheap, horrible windows that were I think they've already had to replace them again.
Yeah.
But this next one, the ones they replaced them with this time were actually windows that should last the house.
For a while.
Well, it would last 50 years if you guys would stop bombing.
Well, the Hubble house.
You can't put cheap windows in a house that is being shaken every single hour. So the big change or the big remodel happened basically the white part and above.
Okay.
So they resanded, resurfaced all the floors. They changed out the flooring in the master bedroom. And added those awful stairs going down, which sunken bedroom is not something you really want. At nighttime, you're going to trip.
Right.
They, in the layout from the 1935 until I believe the Strongs were here in 2010, 2009, 2010, that had survived was there was a staircase, a spiral staircase that went from the kitchen and went into the closet. And the closet is quite large. And the reason for that, and this is kind of an odd design. So when you walk into the master bedroom, the bedroom is quite large, and then there's a door that has been removed. It was removed in the 2010 remodel that goes to a small hallway outside of the bathroom and before you get to the closet. But there was a staircase there. And that went down to the kitchen. And the reason for this is so the general's aide could make his way up to the closet and
get his
service
uniform.
the uniforms,
Oh, okay.
pack for the general if he was going on a trip, without going into the bedroom. And and not going into the personal space upstairs.
So it was just kitchen bedroom or kitchen closet.
Yes.
Yes, kitchen closet. And
That's
then you go,
it.
Okay.
Kitchen, closet, bathroom.
Okay.
Those 3 areas. And in 2010, they decided that at that time, aides were not really being used very often, and they didn't really see it as being an issue. I guess generals figured out how to dress themselves.
Well, I wish somebody would show me.
So that was removed, and that kitchen was made much larger by getting rid of that staircase.
Okay.
But that was one of the big surprises that I found out from the Strongs.
Oh, okay. See, so much hidden
See?
history.
Told you it was. I'm taking the credit here because I'm the one that made the decided to bring Lucas in.
I know. So
Okay, so we're going to backtrack a little bit. So coming from DC in 500 square feet, how's that possible? Is that bigger than this room? Because we're in a closet right now.
I had like a 650 square foot apartment before when I was single, and it was like a living room, the kitchen, a bedroom, and the bathroom.
Well,
Okay.
I have done the
very
measurements. The living room in quarters 1 is the same size as the apartment that I lived in.
Now
in
I got a
DC.
visual. All right. Wow.
So it was
So you're coming from DC, and you pull up, and you got the water on your left. You have quarters 1 on your right. What is your first impression of the home? What's going through your mind?
it was intimidating. I mean, it's a big house. It's a beautiful house. I have never lived in a house that was more than 30 years old. So for me, I was going to have to wrap my head around this. And at the same time, also wrapping my head around Randy's job, living in a fishbowl. But this was it was a grand, beautiful house. And as far as the house was concerned, we, myself and Randy, very quickly began realizing that we had to honor this house.
Okay. That's great. How did you bring your personal touches to the home? Because I believe you even went as far as going down to light switch covers. Did you replace those? It's a yes or no question, Lucas.
So there were certain areas. We went as far as to change out the lights in the receiving room. Were changed out to a hat box chandelier light that we put up just for that house while we lived there. We changed out the light in the living room.
Yes.
Because it was very modern. Corvius is a wonderful company. They did a very good job maintaining. However, they chose modern light fixtures for this historical home. And I think they're still up to this day, and it's horrible that they did that.
Yeah.
So we took down their very modern ceiling fan, and we put up something that was a little bit more rustic, a little bit more in keeping with the house. And then to the dining room, again, this metal, large glass globe chandelier that I think is probably hanging there today. And we took that down and we put up something that was much more like candlelight with little shades. It's something that, the reality, if I could have afforded a crystal chandelier, I should have had that.
Sure.
I didn't have crystal
Why
chandelier
not?
money. So, but I found different things like that to make the house work. In the kitchen, probably in 1999, Randy had bought me a pot rack. A custom-made pot rack.
Yes.
And I went to Corvius, to Marcus at Corvius, and I said, hey, I got this pot rack. Is there any way that I can hang this? And he's just like, don't worry, I got you. And sure enough, he went and he made it where I could swing from that pot rack if I wanted to. So it was those types of touches that we went in and added and made this house our own.
And it showed, which I guess was my point all along.
And you did a lot of your own personal research too, didn't you? When you first moved in to find out about Aberdeen Proving Ground and the house, and you really tried to showcase that, like on the staircase wall, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Randy and I had a heads up that we were coming to Aberdeen Proving Ground. We had about 8 to 9 months of notice that we were coming. So I remember starting to research the property, research Aberdeen Proving Ground in general, and trying to figure out where quarters 1 was. And I really couldn't find it. It was like, well, I'm looking at this one property that's on the bay, and I'm like, well, this is way too big. It was. It was actually the club.
Oh,
top of the
top
bay.
of the bay.
Oh, you thought that was quarters 1? Look
It
at you
was-
go.
I knew that was too big.
Yeah,
But then I go over and
little.
I'm seeing this other house that's out, like it's obviously very secluded, and I thought, well, could that be it? That ended up being the garrison commander's house.
Right.
And quarters one from the aerial shots at the time I was pulling up was actually covered by trees. And I couldn't really tell how big the house was, if that was a house at all. And one of the news stories made me believe that it was the golf course.
Right.
Well, because
property.
that was a golf. Your backyard was a golf course.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I actually remember when we first drove on the base. So, the Christmas before Randy took command, we came to Havre de Grace to kind of check out the area. And Randy surprised me by saying, I think we can drive on base because today's the Army-Navy game and no one's going to be outside. So we drove on base and we quickly got on the Plum Point Loop and we came down and we saw the big white columns, which of course at first I went, and because at this point we had figured out this was quarters one.
Right.
And that confused the hell out of me. I went, well, how's
Did
the
General
front door?
Taylor know at this time, or
We had.
or were you both going on assumptions?
We were partially going on assumptions.
Okay.
We're partially going on assumptions. So our assumption is that this is quarters one. But I think Randy had talked to his boss at the time, General Farrell, who also lived in the house. So Randy had a very good idea from the description. But I'm seeing quarters one for the first time and driving up. And I see what I believe is the front of the house because these big white columns.
Right.
And I'm like, what the hell? There's not even a driveway that goes up to the front. How does that work? So, and I'm like, why did they put the front of the house when
Looking out to the field.
it should be on the other side facing the water. And of course, quarters one has two fronts.
Right.
One on the parade field, one on the water. So we drove past the house very slow, but never stopped, never pulled into the driveway. And that was my first take. And that happened to be in December before Randy took command and we came here to live. At that point, I began to research the property. I began researching the past generals. I began to research what Aberdeen Proving Ground did and currently does. And I found that eBay was a great resource to buy things. And I started bidding on postcards, Baltimore Sun original photographs. The originals. So still with the wax marks from the editor, you flip them over and it has the description of who's in the photo, sometimes even the news article that the photo appeared with. I bought coins from when they had their 50th year anniversary. I bought menus from the officers' mess for Thanksgiving and Christmas menus. I bought a shoebox of letters that someone wrote. Who was stationed here.
Well, I remember, just to show you how generous Lucas is, Susan, it was one of the events
I know where you're going.
that, okay, well, pat yourself on the back once for me. There was a guest at one of the dinners who looked upon the table and as soon as you walked in, and what was it? It was a family member of hers?
His. You're speaking of Pat Vincenti, the county council president.
So who was in the photo?
It was his great aunt.
It was a woman in the photo. So they have dinner and Lucas takes the photo, puts it in a gift bag, and Vincenti walks home with it.
He does.
Which was a very thoughtful thing to do.
And it's an interesting photo too. I have a photo that I still own. That's the name of the photo is "Woman in the Tank," and it's this beautiful composed photo with a woman driving a tank.
Okay.
And it was one of the first photos I bought off of eBay here at Aberdeen Proving Ground. And a year and a half later, I find this other photo that's very similar, also of a tank, but this time with three women, and they're working on the tank. And this is from the 40s. So the war is going on strong. Able-bodied men have been shipped overseas in the war effort, and women are coming online and pulling their weight and taking care of things like tank maintenance.
Right. They were actually called the WOWs for the women ordnance workers. So it was a very different from the waves and the wax and all the other things because they were specifically working on ordnance equipment. So.
Oh.
So
Oh,
that
that's
was
cool.
here at Aberdeen Proving Ground that the wows existed. So.
Well, and that's the photo I bought.
Okay.
So I get the photo, and much like the other photos, I quickly go and grab a frame, I clean it up, and I put it in it, and I put it down beside this other photo of this woman on a tank, and I realize it's the same woman as in each of these photos. And I flip it over, and sure enough, it's from the same day.
Oh, wow.
So these two photos were meant to be together. They were a pair. And I didn't have the photo very long because it was the next event. Pat and Sandy, he's looking at it, and he picks it up, and he goes, "This lady looks familiar," and he turns it over, and he goes, "Oh, my God, Jeannie." He turns to his wife, Jeannie, and he goes, "This is Aunt so-and-so," and he tells me, he goes, "This is my great aunt."
Wow.
So, and her name's there, and it said that she was from this area. I don't think it was Haverty Grace. I think she might have been one of the cities here in the county, but just up from Haverty Grace.
It's amazing.
Something special.
It is something special.
So you either learn to put your photos out or put them face down on the table so nobody walks home with them. But no, it was just, I remember that clear as day because it was just such a generous thing to do. And it really made Pat's day too as well.
Well, and you were here at a really great time because we were just getting ready to celebrate our centennial at Aberdeen Proving Ground. I know that was like really a good impetus to like get involved with the history because, there was it had sort of been a while since people had celebrated the history of Aberdeen Proving Ground, and the centennial in 2017 was really a great chance for us to start bringing the community back involved. With the history of Aberdeen Proving Ground, and to remember, that we share a history. It's not us inside the gate and them outside the gate, but it's all one Harford County Aberdeen Proving Ground history. So.
Well, that was one thing I remember a lot of local politicians, one specifically that had mentioned to me that prior to the Taylors' arrival at APG, Aberdeen Proving Ground was just a sign that they saw from 95, and they had no idea what was going on here. And this was an opportunity to see the Proving Ground and understand the Proving Ground. I would say both of you have really left your mark, and we thank you for that.
And thank you. I remember one lady who showed up. She was not involved in any type of business, the military, which is a little unusual for this area. Because usually there's some lapse with a family member or a spouse that someone is coming on this base. But she got to the house, and I was showing her around, and she confessed to me that she had never been on a military base before in her life. And she believed that she was going to drive on the base, drive down a straight road, and somewhere on the left or the right would be like a command's headquarters, and then at the end of the road would be quarters 1. And she had no idea that she was coming into a self-contained city.
Yes. Yeah. I think that surprises a lot of people. At least it did my sister when she came here. She's like, "You have a Burger King?" Well, we did, but anyway. But you're absolutely right. And we have so many events now, like Demonstration Day. That was a huge success this year, which really brings and allows the community to. We had a live fire display, so people can hear where the booms are coming from. Or as General Taylor used to say, the sounds of freedom.
That did not always go over well.
No, it did. It still does. But no, I mean, and it's a huge success because, what we do here at Aberdeen Proving Ground is just so important.
But we really appreciate you coming and telling us a little bit about what it was like to live in quarters 1, because you certainly have a unique perspective, being one of the few who've gotten to live there over the years. So is there any last story you want to tell us about quarters 1 to wrap it up, or to summarize your 2 years in the fishbowl at Aberdeen Proving Ground at the end of Plumb Point?
Is there a chandelier or two hanging that you still need back, or you got everything?
No. We restored quarters 1 to its glory when we left.
You didn't leave the bear?
No. And Ernest, if you remember Ernest, Ernest is still with me.
Okay. That's the bear that used to hang above the door.
Yeah, actually not a bear. He's a wild boar.
Oh, that's right.
He is looking
I
for
really
a new
screwed
home.
that one up.
He is looking for a new
Bear.
home if anyone's interested.
You're done with Ernest?
He doesn't belong in Florida. No. Even though I think he's from Florida. I mean, he's from Key West.
Oh.
He was a
Is
rescue.
that where you bought him?
He was a rescue from a Key West pawn shop. And the story is that the gentleman who killed him had him stuffed, hung him in his house. His wife hated this boar.
I can't imagine why.
I know, snaggly tooth, because like one tooth is broken off. Yeah, Ernest he's a piece of work. So he hung there for decades, and the gentleman passed away. And according to the pawn shop, on her way to the hospital to deal with the body of her deceased husband, she threw Ernest in the back of her trunk and dropped him off at the pawn shop.
Oh my gosh.
And we find him on a rainy day in Key West where we couldn't go scuba diving. We decided to walk into this pawn shop, and Randy goes, they're going to do awful, horrible things to him. We're taking him home.
Oh.
He frightened the maid at the hotel.
Uh-huh.
She called me Papa, and she was acting as if she was going to have a heart attack. Yeah, he had to be put into the closet for her to clean the room. And then we packaged him up and flew him on Southwest.
Oh, wow.
So, or some carrier, and got him to quarters one. So, but no, he's I think he's too hot for Florida. So he doesn't have a place to land. So I got to find him a new home.
Oh, wow. Susan, Ernest hung above, as soon as you walked into quarters one, above you.
Okay.
Or as you're leaving, I should say.
Right, above the front door.
This wild boar mounted to, the wall above the door.
Yeah.
And everyone would find him as they were leaving.
Yes.
Did he get decorated for Christmas? Like wear a little hat or have tinsel on his?
They did horrible things to him, Susan. But it's quite a conversation piece. Yeah.
Yeah, he is. In closing, as far as like stories, a lot of people asked me if the house was haunted.
Mm-hmm.
All I can say is if the house is haunted, it has the most friendly, polite, quiet ghost ever. They never bother a soul. And I was actually quite comfortable in the home, even at 3 or 4 in the morning when I was decorating for Christmas.
I'm terrified of the mice, let alone a ghost. I'll take a ghost over a mouse any day.
Well, you've seen Rudy Tooty. The mice help you decorate.
No, I'm doing it by myself, thank you.
It was the house was a wonderful responsibility, and I hope that we honored it in the way that the architect designed it to be honored and the way the community wanted it to be honored.
Fantastic.
All right.
That pretty much sums everything up.
That's right, John.
Thank you so much for being here, Lucas. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Susan, what do we have on tap for our next episode?
So we're going to talk a little bit about Plum Point as a designed military landscape, how it functioned in the past, how it functions currently, and how we're using that space that has been at the heart of APG to really celebrate and memorialize our soldiers.
Can't wait to hear all about it. And again, thank you for joining us for part 2 of Plum Crazy at Plum Point. Thank you for listening.